This is a slide presentation that I got from the Solid Waste Management Group here at BYU, and I wanted to just go over it real quickly with you. It kind of reviews what they do at BYU as far as solid waste management goes. So first of all, if you're at BYU, what happens when you throw something away? Well, the first thing that happens is the custodians in the buildings pick it up and take care of it and take it out behind the building and put it into a dumpster. BYU has its own little fleet of garbage trucks, and this is one of those trucks. Remember, we called those packers, and you'll see the big dumpsters in back of all the buildings around BYU campus, and BYU has these packers that on a regular basis will come by and pick up the garbage. That garbage is taken by these packers to the transfer station. It's in Springville. It's about 10 miles away. I think it's on 4th South in Springville. It's on the west side of I-15. And those trucks just go and dump it into a big building where it's packed further into a different kind of a truck. You can see here, these trucks are more suited for hauling a large amount of refuse over a highway. And in fact, the landfill is located about 25 miles away from that transfer station. So the garbage then at Springville, they take the garbage to Springville. It's repacked into another truck. They push it into piles there, and then it's hauled down to the landfill. When it gets down to the landfill, they dump it down there at the landfill, and they put it into big piles, and they compact it with equipment there at the landfill and then cover it with dirt. We'll talk about landfills a little bit later on, but specifically landfills are required to cover the waste that they receive at the landfill every day. So they have to put cover material, basically just dirt on top of that, so the refuse doesn't blow all around and it stays sanitary. Okay, so what about when you recycle stuff at BYU? Now this is a little bit old, but it's pretty current as it ends up. So when you recycle something at BYU, you throw it into those recycling bins, and the staff at BYU comes around on a regular basis and picks up all the recycle bins. You've seen them around before. Those bins change every once in a while, and sometimes they're more specific about what kind of waste you put in them, and sometimes they're not. Over the years, though, it's changed on and off a little bit. But kind of the same thing happens is they try to sort the waste at the source. We try to get all the waste collected right at the source and separated. So all the newspaper goes one place, colored paper one place, white paper another place, and that kind of thing. Okay, that waste is hauled to a facility on campus where it's baled up, and different kinds of waste is baled together. So all the cardboard's baled together, all of the white office paper, all the colored paper, all the newspaper. Okay, once it's baled up, then it's put on big trucks and shipped to a paper mill where it's reprocessed. Okay. Annually, BYU recycles over about 100 tons of junk mail, 400 tons of newspaper, and about 1,300 tons of paper total. So what if you're in Provo, not on BYU campus, and you recycle? What happens there? Well, there is recycling in Provo, but it's been handled in several different ways over the years. And right now, it's a fairly decent system. But let's talk about it for just a second. First of all, there are various drop-off stations all around the community. So most of them take just newspaper, but they'll also take like phone books and cardboard, some of them. So at some of the supermarkets like Smith's, and when Movies 8 existed, there used to be one over there, and at Kiwanis Park and at the Glenwood Apartments, and then most of the elementary schools and like the junior highs have these kind of dumpster looking kind of bins that are out in the parking lots where you can come and put newspaper and phone books and that kind of stuff back to the community. Also in Provo, individuals can have green bins where they can recycle their green waste. So you can take your grass clippings and your leaves and branches and all those things and put them in a bin. This shows it costing $4 a month. I think that's pretty close to what it is right now. I'm not exactly positive, but um, Provo City actually did something recently that really increased the use of these things. If you move into Provo now, they will automatically bring you a regular garbage can, a green waste can, and a recycling can. And rather than you opting into the program and paying so much a month, you are a part of the program unless you opt out. So in the community, you're going to get those cans unless you tell them you don't want them, and you'll just be charged for them. Okay. They also in Provo have a Christmas tree curbside recycling program. So every end of December and the first part of January, they'll pick up all the Christmas trees in town and they take them down to the green waste recycling facility. The blue bins that you see around town, most of them now are just have a blue lid, but they're the recycling bins. And you can put paper in there and plastic and metal, but right now Provo doesn't accept glass. Again, they cost money to use, but you don't opt into it anymore. The city automatically gives it to you and you have to opt out of that program. And the city comes by, actually, there's a municipal solid waste company that the city helps operate as a participates in that will come by once a week and collect that waste at the same time as they collect the regular garbage and the green waste. Green waste is not collected all year round. They end at the end of November and start up again in like March or something like that. So in the wintertime, they don't collect the green waste. Okay, so what about results for recycling in Provo? Well, basically, the yard waste program diverts about 7,000 tons a year from the landfill. They get about 5,800 tons that are dropped off at the green waste recycling facility, and they pick up another 1,200 tons from the curbside pickup. Household recycling, the blue cans, diverts about 54 tons per month as it ends up, which is about 650 tons a year. And that's pretty significant. Okay, Provo City landfills about 2,000 tons per month as it ends up, which is about 24,000 tons per year. That's what ends up going to the landfill. Okay, so what happens to the curbside recycling material in Provo? Well, first of all, there's a sorting facility in Provo. So all that stuff they pick up in the blue cans, it goes into a different kind of a packer, and that truck goes down to a facility where it's sorted. And basically, they just dump it all out into a big pile. They put it onto a conveyor belt, and it goes by, and people actually by hand sort out the materials, the plastics and the paper and the metal and that kind of thing. Then once they sort it out, they push it into piles. They they bale that material and stack it up, and then they ship it off again if it's paper to a paper making plant. And I'm not sure exactly what they do right now with all the plastic material. Plastic recycling's a real problem because of all the different types of plastic and how they're basically handled differently because they're chemically different. Okay, well, what about economics? Is this all worth it? As it ends up, figuring the cost of recycling isn't as simple as you might think it is. So what do you need to do when you're figuring this cost? Do you make a profit when you recycle or not? Well, that's not the whole point. The whole point is it cheaper to recycle than it is to throw something away in the long run? Not necessarily is it just you make money when you recycle, but there's a benefit to recycling if it's cheaper than just throwing it away in the landfill. Okay, so let's look at garbage for just a second. Okay, so first thing that happens with the garbage, you put it into a trash can, and then the custodian comes along and collects it and puts it in a dumpster. So you have the cost of the custodian. This is, we're talking about BYU kind of here now. So the garbage truck then comes and picks that stuff up from the dumpster in back of the building. It costs about $100 an hour to operate that garbage truck. Then they have to drive down to the transfer station. That takes a little while. There's the cost of the operation of the truck again. Okay. Then when you take a load of garbage down to the transfer station, it costs money to dump it out, and that's called a tipping fee. So basically, the university is, in this case, pays about 25 or $27 a ton to just dump the stuff out at the transfer station. Okay. Then we got to drive that garbage 25 miles away to the landfill. Again, there's the cost of operating the truck. The garbage is dumped out at the landfill and it has to be processed there, has to be buried, and there's the cost of the land and all the people who work there. So it's a pretty expensive kind of a process. Okay, so what about if we recycle? So you still, a person's putting the waste into the recycling bin, same as before. Okay, then a custodian comes and collects it just like before, and the collection truck comes to pick it up. In this case, it's not a garbage packer, but a recycling truck comes and picks it up, and that costs money. They drive, in this case, just 2 miles to the BYU recycling facility. Again, costs some money to operate the truck there. And then the paper's dumped out and it's sorted and baled, just like it kind of is within the city facility. And the paper is sold and it's shipped to a paper mill on the West Coast or sometimes overseas. It used to be a lot of stuff was shipped to China, but China has recently quit buying a lot of our recycled materials. So there's some revenue from the paper, and there's savings from not having to put it in the landfill, and there's the cost of shipping, and so there's some savings there. So then we make it into new paper, or we recycle it into some other kind of a product that keeps us from cutting down some trees and having to make virgin or new paper. Okay, so let's kind of continue on a little bit. I hope there wasn't a little bit of break there. Maybe there is, but the rest of this presentation is just a whole bunch of statistics that these BYU folks had put together, and let's just review some of it real quickly. Okay, so this is showing the difference between 1960 and 2001 and the pounds of waste that are generated in different categories per person in the United States. And you can see there's been a really significant increase in that period of time. Now, this is per capita. This is not just the nation as a whole. Okay, so this gives you a little bit of an idea of pounds per day per state, you know, on the average per different kind of state. You can see in Utah we're 12th, we're pretty high. Actually, that's, I think the 1 is the lowest, so that's pretty good actually for Utah. I like that. Okay, if we look at the amount recycled, on the other hand, though, we're not doing very well. We don't recycle nearly as much as they do in other states. Landfilling, the amount per pounds per person that are landfilled in the state, we're kind of right in the middle. And this is showing a little bit about, again, you know, where does the waste ultimately end up? Is it landfilled or recycled or burned or whatever? We do have an incineration facility here in Utah where they actually incinerate waste to make energy. It's up, I can't remember exactly. It's north of Salt Lake, someplace up there in Weber County, I think. Okay, and now there's just a whole bunch of statistics, and I'm just going to put them over here. You can review these kind of at your leisure if you'd like, and kind of look a little bit at you know, individual states and how much they landfill and how much they recycle and how much they burn and, you know, that kind of thing. So I'll just take a second and go through this. You can obviously go back over this whenever you'd like to do that. So at the bottom line on this slide, you can see the national average, and you can compare, Utah's up on the top line, so you can compare us to the national average and see what you think of that. Okay, so this, again, just some more statistics. This is from 2001, so it's a little bit old, but it's not that far off. But, the majority of municipal solid waste is paper. Yard waste has a significant amount. Food scraps, plastic, metals, clothing, and glass. You can also see here, if we look at the amount of material that's recycled, what kind of material is recycled. And this is saying, what percent of the total recycled materials is this kind of material? If we looked at individual things, for example, if we looked at aluminum cans are like a success story as far as recycling goes. And the reason for that is there's a market. It's way cheaper to take an aluminum can and reprocess it into a new aluminum can than it is to go and mine bauxite ore and make new aluminum and make a can from new material. And because it's so cheap, it's worth a lot of money, the recycling. So aluminum cans get recycled really well because they have value in the marketplace. Okay. So again, this is after you recycle. What's the estimated composition of the solid waste after we remove the recyclables from that material? Okay, well, what do we do from here? Where does it go from here? What kind of changes do we need to make? If we don't make any changes, there's some significant problems that could occur. In 1988, there were 7,924 landfills. That time, a lot of them were called dumps, and they weren't regulated very well. If we look more currently, if we look in 2001, that number had dropped significantly to 1,858. One of the reasons for that is they started to be regulated a lot more strictly by the government and controlled. But what that means is there aren't nearly as many places anymore for this material to be disposed of. So at a national level, there's a capacity problem. Well, I guess you could say at a national level, there is not really a capacity problem. There's really enough landfill space. The problem is it doesn't occur where it needs to occur. So for example, if you're in New York City, there's tons and tons of waste being generated in New York City, but there are not landfills located close to New York City. So where does that stuff go? So that presents a real problem. This location problem is really significant. So the landfill that we have here in Utah County, and first of all, Utah County is kind of divided up into two landfill districts. There's one in the north part of the county and one in the south. The one that we have in the south that serves all the cities in Utah County from Provo down south has estimated to have a capacity of about 75 years. So it'll last for 75 years, and then we just need to go find a new place. Well, there's lots of empty land in Utah County, and we can find more space for it. But there are some places where that's not the case. Okay. Now, there's been other problems that have occurred with landfills. So, for example, in 2001, down in Spanish Fork, there was a developer that ended up building a development on top of the former county landfill. And they started noticing asbestos around, and potentially explosive concentrations of methane gas were detected under some of the homes. And there was a real situation that occurred because this landfill hadn't been handled properly. And in 2002, 10 of the homes in this subdivision had to be moved and abandoned because of the problems that occurred because of it. So some of the things that are happening, and you've heard about some of these things before. For example, right now 10 states have what are called bottle bills, and they charge a deposit for every container that has carbonated drinks in it. So far, nobody's passed bills for like juice bottles or water bottles and that kind of thing, but that probably is going to happen in the near future. 30 states have banned yard waste from their landfills. They've just said, hey, we're just not going to put green waste in the landfill anymore. There's lots of other things we can do with green waste. and that's on the increase. Most of the bans occurred really early on, and that's really helped reduce the demand on landfills and extended the capacity fairly significantly in many cases. There's all sorts of other things that we need to worry about. For example, lead, heavy metals and toxic substances that end up in the waste stream that goes to landfills. You ever thought about, what happens to cars, old cars? They're full of all sorts of junk that is pretty toxic. The fluids that are in them, antifreeze and the old oil and gasoline and, all sorts of stuff. You can't just smash a car up and go throw it in the landfill anymore. You've got to take care of it in one way or another. There are all sorts of people now that are looking at how you can how you can process and sort plastic, and there's some real advances that could be happening in the near future. But right now, it's just there isn't a real good way of handling plastic materials. But I imagine in the future that's going to happen. So what I'd like to leave you with is, what's your stewardship? What's your responsibility in all of this? And this is a scripture that we pointed out earlier on in the semester, but it's in the Doctrine and Covenants in section 104, verses 13 through 17. For it is expedient that I, the Lord, should make every man accountable as a steward over earthly blessings, which I have made and prepared for my creatures. I, the Lord, stretched out the heavens and built the earth. My very handiwork, and all things therein are mine. And it is my purpose to provide for my saints, for all things are mine. But it must needs be done in mine own way. And behold, this is the way that I, the Lord, have decreed to provide for my saints, that the poor shall be exalted, in that the rich may be made low. For the earth is full, and there is enough and to spare. Yea, I prepared all things, and have given unto the children of men to be agents unto themselves. So, Heavenly Father's given us what we need, but we need to be careful with it and use it wisely, and we'll be able to have what we need. Thanks. Operates green waste disposal drop-off place, and it's located over in East Bay. It's kind of by the golf course over there, and there's kind of a hill. It actually was the old landfill, and people in the community can take grass clippings and leaves and branches and stumps. You can't take really big trees, but you can take all sorts of green waste and stuff over there, and they'll process it, and that saves a lot of stuff from going to the landfill. They compost it, and then they sell that compost